There being a quorum present, could everyone find their seat? And we'll call this meeting to order. We're going to start off with in a minute, the pledge, but we're also going to have some music. So if the band would like to come enter. If you could stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you could remain standing for the national anthem. One more song coming, Alma Mater.
Alma Mater, set.
Are we all done?
We're all done, yes.
Dismissed.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, do we have any new members tonight? Could you please stand, and I'll ask you to give your name and precinct? Okay, wait for the microphone, please. Where's our microphones? Here we go.
They were so distracted.
I know. Enthralled by the band.
It's on.
My name's Joe Conti. I'm from Precinct 5.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm Gail Demore, and I'm from Precinct 6.
Gail, welcome.
Thank you.
I'd also like to welcome our state representative, Ken Gordon, who is here with us. And as I've said before, his attendance here is a lot better than many other members, so thank you, Ken. A thank you also to those who were going to be running around with the microphones tonight. Madison Doherty, Nolan Woods, Paul Fowler, Doug Edwards, Sean Gallagher, and Ethan Sayre. Thank you very much for your help tonight. The moderator would entertain a motion to allow us to vote by raising our hand instead of standing. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Opposed? The motion is carried. The moderator would also entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting to Wednesday, September 25th at 7:30, should we not finish our business tonight. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Okay, now on to the warrant. I'm told that Article 5 has been withdrawn. So, Article 1, reports of town offices and committees. The Sidewalk Committee, I know, has a short report. Mr. Moran, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve Moran, Precinct 3. The Sidewalk Committee finished its work over the summer by doing two things. One is that we had a session on June 18th where we talked about the work that the committee did, and that was recorded by BCAT and attended by 10 or so different folks. So if you haven't seen that, I recommend going to the BCAT site and taking a look. The presentation's about an hour, and we got a lot of good feedback from it. The second thing is that there was a lot of complaints about the condition of the sidewalks on Cambridge Street. So John Larson, Adam Sinesi, and myself walked it from Billerica to Woburn. We took about 150 pictures and we put a report together. We'll be sending that with the support of the Planning Department and the Board of Selectmen to our state representative, Ken Gordon, to lobby the Mass DOT to actually address the poor conditions of Cambridge Street, since they're the ones who maintain that street. And then we made some recommendations with regards to new sidewalks and existing sidewalks, which are in a report that I'll ask Ms. Warfield to send to everybody here. But we're going to request a state appropriation through Representative Gordon's office for either Muller, Stony Brook, or Blanchard roads for new sidewalks. We would like to request that $300,000 be appropriated from free cash annually when available for construction of new sidewalks based on the following prioritization: need for pedestrian safety, enables students to safely walk or bicycle to school, streets that enable pedestrians to walk to and from commercial districts, and streets which enable pedestrians to travel to parks and recreation, and that would be under the control of the Selectman's office. We are also requesting that the school committee take a look at joining the Safe Routes to School program. It's a program that is funded either through the state or federally, but managed by the state for assisting kids to get to and from school safely, either through bicycle or walking for K through 8. It comes with 6 different components, 4 of which are through instruction, but there is an infrastructure grant portion of it if we participate in it, and we would be able to get grants. I think Bedford had their schools around Mudge Way done with a similar type of program. With regards to existing sidewalks, we recommend that we continue the restoration and replacement policy adopted by the Board of Selectmen in their March 2017 meeting. I talked about lobbying the DOT to help us repair Cambridge Street. Recommend that the DPW establish a sidewalk evaluation policy, much like we do with roads at the conclusion of the winter season, and address any safety concerns or repair needs that result from that season. Recommend that the potholes that are on the Francis Wyman sidewalk near Cambridge Road be addressed because there's some public safety risks there. And then also spoke with the planning board with regards to not allowing the small cells on the double poles because they present a safety hazard, and we'd also like to see those poles get out of the right of way. So if there's any questions or more, other information you may have, please reach out to me or anyone from the Sidewalk Committee. That would be Adam Sinesi, Christine Warren, Mildred Nash, and Sean Connors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Other reports? Planning, I believe, has something to say. Kristen, Ms. Kasner. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Question for the Sidewalk Committee.
Andy Wellsbean, Precinct 3. Can you say a little bit more about that Safe Routes to School program and what would be required to become a partner with the state program?
Through the moderator.
Mr. Moran.
Through the moderator. So the Safe Routes to Schools consists of 6 components, 4 of which are education-based in terms of working with the school department, teachers, public safety, et cetera, to ensure that kids know and parents know how to get to and from school safely. Provided that we go through the 4 components of the education and working with the community, we can apply for grants to help us build out infrastructure to and from K through 8 schools. So it wouldn't apply for the high school, but it would apply for the 4 elementary schools in Marshall-Simons. So it may help around Locust Street or in the neighborhoods. But the school committee has to review that process and adopt it, and they have to be willing, and also public safety in the town. So there's some cross-coordination, and we have to figure out who's the right department to own that. Is that the schools? Is that the public safety? Is that the Board of Selectmen? But once they adopt that program and put it in place, then they can work through the pillars and identify projects. You're welcome.
Thank you. Further question, Mr. Bell. Another quick question for him?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Roger Bell, Precinct 6. Since we already have, through the DPW, our annual sidewalk construction projects, did you work with DPW to integrate some of what you're talking about? And what kind of response are we looking at in terms of overall from the DPW with you?
Through the moderator, we did work with DPW in terms of the initial onboarding of the committee and learning about the different programs that we have. We also met with the town engineer, Tom Hayes, in a session. Keep in mind that the policy you're referring to is the replacement of existing sidewalks, which will address sidewalks that are in poor condition when a street is being repaved. But the town currently doesn't have a new sidewalk policy. And so this $300,000 that we're recommending is in addition to that and is outside the scope of the actual replacement policy that's currently adopted by the BOS.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Ms. Kastner, please.
I just wanted to update the body. If you recall, I did a presentation on life science and biotechnology a few town meetings ago, and I just wanted to thank all of you for your vote on that matter. If you remember and recall, we were rated by the Mass Technology Council as bronze at that time, and due to the vote of this body and a lot of hard work by a lot of other people, and this group included, and some of you sat on the forum, Mass Biotechnology announced last week that we are now rated as a platinum community for life science, which is extraordinary and among an elite few. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for such good news. True kudos for you and your efforts. Does anybody else have a report? Any other committee? The moderator has a couple things he'd like to say. A little unusual for the moderator to make a report, but a year ago, this body voted overwhelmingly to support additional liquor licenses for the mall. And if you pay attention to BCAT News, you may have noted that I was quoted as objecting to the selectmen's stance on it, because after town meeting voted on it, they were still opposed and were presenting testimony to the committee that would make the decision on that. And I just wanted to explain that to you. While the town is an incorporated entity, and while our elected officials are officers of that corporation, you guys represent the corporation itself. Seems to me you have final word on lots of things the town says. So I just wanted to remind you of that, because I want you to jealously guard your authority. It's important that we all remember what our responsibilities are, and that we guard them so they don't slip away. I'm not trying to say that other groups and committees shouldn't disagree. I'm trying to say, like people out here we certainly don't have unanimous opinions when we vote on something in town meeting, and there's lots of disagreement. But when we finally get down to the final decision, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, if the majority says yes, that's the voice of the town, and it should be respected. So thank you. Let's move on. Article 2. Oh, excuse me, Amy had something. Never mind. Kick me, Amy, so I don't forget.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to report back to you all from the May town meeting, the approvals that we've gotten from the Attorney General's office regarding the articles that were passed in May. And Article 35, which was the stretch energy code being added to the general bylaws, was approved. Article 36, which was the change in the treasurer-collector position, being removed from being elected to being appointed, was approved. And Article 37, which dealt with the adoption of the payments revolving account for the surplus school building, that was also approved. A school building surplus account, I'm sorry. And then Article 38, which was the modification to the Planned Development District, was also approved. Article 39, which deals with the small cell, the Attorney General has requested and been granted by legal counsel the ability to have another 30 days to approve that. If you all are keeping track of small cell stuff, the Supreme Court is made a decision about the FCC's position on that, and so that's why the Attorney General has requested some additional time to review all of those. And then also, the other article was from the special town meeting, dealt with the small cell addition in the general bylaws, and the Attorney General did approve those. So that's the status with the items that you all voted on in May. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Okay. Now I guess we can move on to Article 2. Annual town election date. Oh, it is hereby requested that the article be moved as follows, as printed in the warrant. It's been moved and seconded by Ways and Means, so that the town election will be on April 4th, 2020. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Article 2 is passed. Article 3 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. This is for dealing with the vacancy in town meeting, and the article is as printed in the warrant. Ms. Saltman, would you like to present on this? Mr. Moran, you have a question? Let her make her presentation first, please. No, actually, go ahead, Steve. You told me what the amendment is. Go ahead and make it.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The amendment is I'm simply changing the word his to theirs so that it's gender neutral to respect that both men and women participate as town meeting members. So in the first paragraph, the wording would change to, the office of a town meeting member shall become vacant upon their death, resignation, or removal from office in any manner authorized by law. A vacancy in the town meeting membership shall be filled at the next regular town election. And the following paragraph is a deletion, so there's no modification to it.
Do I hear a second on the amendment? Discussion on it? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Okay, the article has been amended by one word. Ms. Saltman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me all right? So today's my birthday. I want to thank you all for coming to my party. All right? May you all reach 82 in as great a shape and fine figure of health and live many, many years more, thanks to our wonderful recreation department. Okay. So why have I submitted this article? We just had an election right before town meeting for Precinct 5, I believe, correct? And 10 town meeting members showed up, and I gathered there were 2 candidates, am I correct? And 1 was elected. I had a handout up at the back. I hope you all got it, because past history has shown that when we have vacancies, and our law says that the precinct members in that precinct gathered together to nominate someone who's interested in filling the vacancy, that very few town meeting members show up at those gatherings. When we've had it right before town meeting, as tonight, there were 10. But we got 18 town meeting members in each precinct, or 17 if there's a vacancy. And if you look at the handout I had up at the back, the yellow stripe down the middle, which I hand-colored, I passed kindergarten, you can tell from way back in 2014 that very few of us are showing up. As Bill Belichick would say, do your job. I'm asking you, are we doing our job? Are we showing up? Are we electing people for the vacancy? If you think about it, I think we're not showing up, and that's a concern. Basically, without going through my long speech I got written here, what I'm trying to say is I think we should let the vacancies ride until the next annual town election and let the voters in the precinct choose their duly elected representative. We're not a sorority, we're not a fraternity, we're not a country club. We're elected people, democratically elected, and we should allow the other people in our precinct to do the same thing. So if you're wondering, well, you know, there'll be a vacancy until the next town meeting. If you look at page 2 of the handout, we haven't been showing up for town meeting, guys and gals. We really haven't. We really have to be more diligent. We have to do our job. We really have to do it better. And I will just emphasize that I think the approximately 2,300 registered voters in each of our precincts should have a right to elect their duly elected town representative. Thank you very much.
Discussion on this article. Mr. Glantz.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Noel Glantz, Precinct 1. I think this is an interesting idea. I'm not thrilled with letting vacancies just ride, especially if they happen early in the year. Having people who are eager enough to come to one of those pre-meetings to try to get nominated, even though it wasn't a full vote yet, to volunteer to fill the seat. If someone wants to volunteer, you know, I think it's worthwhile to allow that. I wonder if a compromise could be having a quorum required for such a pre-meeting. I mean, looking at the numbers, there's big discrepancies between 0 and 1 sometimes versus 7 or 8 or 9 showing up. I wonder if maybe there's a minimum threshold we could include, if that's been thought about, or if we could possibly add that. Thank you.
That would be too much of a change to this, Nolan. So I don't think we could do it with this article. It would have to be a bylaw change for the existing bylaw that had that in it. Further discussion. Mr. Doob.
Ed Doobie, Precinct 2, and I'm one of those people that was elected midterm. And I didn't just walk into the position. I didn't know anybody on the Precinct 2 delegation. The position was announced in the local paper, the Union, for about a month, okay, before I actually threw my name in the hat. Went down. I was not voted in the first time. I was told, okay, you know, maybe something else open up. We'll keep you in mind. Somebody else resigned a while after that. I came down again, and I was voted in. I've been to every meeting. I do my homework. I reach out to Amy. I reach out to the moderator when I need to. I think it's better to have me here than to have the position vacant. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So,
Ms. Saltman.
Thank you. Is this working? Okay. So I was present in Precinct 2 when Mr. Doobie was one of the nominees by the other 5 town meeting members who were present. There were 6 town meeting members there. There were 2 candidates. And when we voted, we had a 3-3 split. So one of the candidates said, I'll remove myself from the nomination. So the second candidate was actually picked to fill the vacancy. And that's what really was the straw that broke my camel's back, because I said, this shouldn't be like that, you know? The candidate that withdrew wasn't even a town meeting member, and in essence, he picked the other candidate to be the town meeting member. And I commend Tom and all of you who've come to this great body by this process. It's a good process, except we're not working it right. We're not working it well. So I really think we have to improve it and let the people vote. We have all this gerrymandering going on and people not registering to vote and all these other issues about getting voters to come out. And we're depriving the voters of making that decision. Think about it. Let's be democratic. To coin an old sage who said when people wanted to leave Egypt, let my people go, I say to you, let the people vote.
Ms. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sally Willard, Precinct 4. Myrna, when there's a vacancy, so if someone is elected tonight, I believe that they actually have to run for as a non-incumbent in the next town election. Okay. So at least there's representation from that precinct until the next town election. So this would give us the people who were just elected 2 town meetings before the next election. So you're just saying no interim election by town meeting members. I think that we should we should continue the process as it is today. Thank you.
Up at the back there. Yes, I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Amanda Laskowski, Precinct 2. I, too, was appointed to town meeting, and I, too, had to run as a non-incumbent at the next town meeting. And I feel that having not enough representation for each precinct is just not going to do well for the body. Saying that, you know, because town meeting members don't show up to town meeting, that they should be elected in the next election instead of being appointed is kind of saying the brakes on the car don't work, but let's fix the windshield wipers instead. It's kind of 2 different problems. So I'm gonna say no to this. I think that not having a fully represented precinct is worse than having someone appointed and then having to rerun in the next election.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Is it on?
Yep.
Was this article brought before the General Bylaw Review Committee?
Yes.
And could we hear a report of what their vote was, please?
Mr. Miller, my apologies. I should have recognized you for earlier.
I'm Dave Miller, Precinct 4, Vice Chair of the Bylaw Review Committee. We did call a meeting to review and vote on this, but our committee is down to a bare minimum quorum, and one of the members had a last-minute medical issue come up, so we could not take an official vote on it.
Follow-up comment, please. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I forgot to announce my name. My name's Scott Martin. I'm in Precinct 7. Since the process for changing a bylaw, general bylaw, is to have it go through the Bylaw Review Committee and be voted on the change, I can't support this article because it hasn't followed the process that exists that it should be following. Thank you.
May I respond?
Go ahead, Myrna.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There were 2 people present at the Bylaw Review Committee. I believe there were only 3 people on the committee, and the 2 people that were there heard what I had to say, and they approved it. Well, there aren't 5, okay? So therefore, it doesn't hold water? Well, some of our committees are not up to snuff either, so. Yes, I know that.
Mr. Sinesi.
Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Move the question.
The question has been moved. This is not debatable. All those in favor of moving the question? All those opposed? Question has been moved. Okay, so now we'll vote on the article. All those in favor of Article 3? All those opposed? The motion fails. Thank you, Myrna, for your efforts. Article 4 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from the sewer infiltration fund the sum of $27,750 for the purpose of paying the FY 2020 debt service. Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 9-0-0 in favor.
Selectmen, who's going to speak for them?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The vote was 4-0.
Thank you. Is anyone making any further comments on it?
No.
Questions on the article? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Article 5 has been withdrawn. Article 6 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from the negotiated settlement account the sum of $73,305 for the purpose of funding the approved collective bargaining agreement between the town and the Burlington Police Command Officers contract. Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 9-0-0 in favor.
Thank you. Selectmen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The vote was 5-0 in favor.
Presentation by the Selectmen. Anyone to speak on it? Mr. Denizio.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Okay, Article 6. Let me start by, I want to thank both sides of the negotiating team, both teams. Anybody that's done collective bargaining before knows that it's not always easy, and both sides were able to remain professional and thoughtful throughout the whole process, so I just want to thank both sides. I thank the union team and thank the town team, and also a special thanks to the chiefs today for finding potentially an alternative revenue stream, delivering Amazon packages. That's very thoughtful too. So hopefully we'll be in good shape. So last spring town meeting, we were here before you with all but one of our collective bargaining agreements to be approved. This is the final one. So this will, if approved today, will mean that all of our employees are under an agreement for this year. I think that's the first time in a long time that's been the case. So that's great news. So this agreement is for the Police Command Union. This is 16 employees. This is a 3-year deal that begins this fall. So it'd be this year, next year, and the year after. The terms of the agreement are similar fact pattern to the ones we were here talking about in the spring. 3-year deals, and the first year with an annual wage adjustment of 2.5%. The second year, 2.25%, and the third year, 1.75%, following the same pattern as the previous ones. We also have an added new step for the most senior of our officers that have been here for 15 years or more. There's a new step added for that. There's also some changes to the, some changes and adjustments to the holiday and detail rates. For the non-compensation package, similar to the other contracts, there's some changes and clarifications in the areas of vacation leave, sick leave, and electronic pay stubs. And also new to the contract this year is some language about identifying or establishing a deadline for filing a grievance and establishing a probationary period for new command officers. The first year of this agreement will cost $73,505, and the source would be a transfer from FY20 negotiated settlements, so it wouldn't have an effect on the budget that you approved in May. Happy to take any questions.
Questions on this article? I believe Town Council has a question that's being resolved.
Mr. Moderator, Town Council just point out that in the warrant, it lists FY 19, 20, and 20, but the actual years of the contract are 20, 21, and 22.
So I'll need a motion to amend. All those in favor of the motion to amend? Opposed? Okay, the motion has been amended. Back to the main motion. Does anyone have any comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Article 7, Transportation Subsidy. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from the Beeline Revolving Fund the sum of $50,000 for the purpose of performing a transportation subsidy pilot program, same to be spent under the direction of the town administrator. Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted to support this 9-0-0.
Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Board of Selectmen voted 5-0-0 in favor of this article.
Thank you. Is someone presenting on this?
Mr. Moderator, thank you.
Mr. Sanchez.
Good evening. So, as you recall, the last couple of Springtown meetings, we've been talking about the future of the Beeline as we've known it. Just as a recap, just 10 years ago, we were providing over 50,000 rides per year on the Beeline. This past fiscal year, we were down to about 10,500, and it continues to decline at about 20% rate every year. So as promised at the Springtown meeting, we had a couple of things going to try to find a long-term replacement for this program. We said that the Beeline as we know it, with the one bus going around town, is not something we will present in the future to you for a vote. So, and you may recall as well that the town of Burlington engaged together with the towns of Lexington and Bedford on a tri-town study to see if we could do things regionally, maybe getting some benefit from efficiencies and regionalization, et cetera. As such, we were able to obtain a grant to study our systems and to see if we could make it better and maybe even more economically feasible for the three towns. After about a year of study and going through, we had a few public meetings. Every community had public meetings. We had 3 public meetings here in Burlington. The solutions that were presented to us actually will cost even more money than what it's costing us right now to operate. For the ones of you who attended the meetings, although they were not very well attended, we did have about 6 people at the last hearing. We talked about doing microtransit as one of the solutions. Microtransit is sort of like Uber or shared Uber, in which there is a minivan that will go around town, but you're actually sharing the ride to go from point A to point B. But that point A is not your home necessarily. You may have to walk to the corner to get to this microtransit, and then they will drop you off close by to where you need to be, but not exactly where you want to go. As we looked at this program and some other ones internally, such as doing nothing, running a microtransit with our own COA buses or our own buses, we looked at using a taxi service as well as doing Uber and Lyft, something similar to that. We are recommending tonight that we do a pilot program in which we will subsidize our users, our current users of our Beeline, to pretty much go where they need to go. We'll subsidize them via using a system like Uber or Lyft, or taxi, if that may be the case, up to a cost of $10 per ride. We will do it based on 3 factors. One is age, another one disability, and the third is income. So we figured that with this system, we're able to provide probably a better service than we're currently providing, since the system will be on demand. And it'll probably break even as far as what the town is paying for the service, but it'll definitely provide a better service for our users. So tonight, we're asking you to allow us to use $50,000 of the fund that we currently have in the Burlington Transit System. These are funds that by the end of FY20, which is June of next year, we will turn back to the town if we were not to use them, to allow us to do this pilot program over 6 months, probably starting in December or January, all the way through May, June, to see if there's something that will be feasible to the town to do, and also to get all the kinks out of it if it's a system we'll continue to provide for the town. So again, tonight, all we're asking you is to authorize a transfer of funds from our current Burlington Transit to these other funds so we can actually try this transit system. Am I forgetting something?
Yes, ma'am. Wait for a microphone, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm a user of the transit system, and if you take that away from me, sometimes I take it 2 or 3 times a day, I won't have transportation. Uber and Lyft, you need to have a smartphone, as I understand it. Not everybody has that. Oh, I live at 15 Birch Crest Street. My name's Dorothea Rusopoulos. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. 2 or 3 times a day, sometimes I use it. I can depend on it on coming on a time. If I call a taxi, sometimes I have to wait 45 minutes, an hour, if they're busy. There's not that many taxis in the town of Burlington, you know. And what's the other thing? The Uber, the Lyft. What's the other thing? Taxi. I'm just saying that if you take that away from us, there are also people in my building who are special needs. They take this Beeline every day to take walks. You take that away from them, they're not going to have that. It's just not dependable.
Thank you for
won't
your
have any
comments.
transportation.
Thank you, Dorothy. Excuse me, Marge.
Just real quick, one of the things that we would also be using besides Uber, Lyft, and taxis for this is a program called GoGo Grandparent. And GoGo Grandparent was invented, or it was come up with by a grandson of a woman who lost her license and realized, you know, she didn't have a smartphone and she had no way of using Uber or Lyft. This was out in California where there is no, you know, public transportation, basically. So the program basically is you pay a little bit more for using it, but you don't need to have a smartphone. You call them, the main number, and they set up the ride for you. What's nice about GoGo Grandparent is that you, they kind of, they kind of almost pre-screen it. They can't screen them, but if someone is, you know, known to not be that great, not have them, you know, not be very patient, not be able to manage a walker, or you know, just kind of give a little bit of extra help to someone who needs it, if they see that person come up on a ride, they will cancel it and rebook the ride. So it's just another option. So those aren't the only 3 options. There's also this other option that helps people kind of navigate Uber and Lyft. So they would be allowed to use that as well through the program.
Mr. Kaye, please.
Silvana Shakir, Precinct 6. My question is, when you say the go-go grandma ride, it costs a little more. What does that little more means? Because it means a lot to senior citizens, and they have no other source of income, so that little more needs to be specified.
It seems about 27 cents a mile more. And then it's a little 27 cents if they have to watch the ride, which they often do. But if there's like traffic jam or something, then it's 27 cents a minute. So it can go up a little, it can go up more, but with the voucher, it would be a lot less.
Thank you.
Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Webb, Precinct 7. So maybe, Marge, this is for you. So the Council on Aging has transportation. How would this program, transferring money from the Beeline, coordinate with or dovetail with the present Council on Aging transportation system? That's for seniors, of course, I realize.
Right, so the COA van is only for seniors and is only within a specified amount of time. So it's, like 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, a little bit later on Wednesdays and till 12 on Fridays. And for medical appointments and grocery shopping, only a couple times a week, plus bringing people to the senior center. This would allow people to go to the doctor at any time. They could go to the emergency room, to urgent care. They can go to the mall, which we don't take people to the mall, except for a short period of time on Saturday. It would give people who have to get to work more hours that they could actually work. So I know there's a woman who's a senior who works at the mall. She can't use our van at all, so she's completely dependent on the public transportation for that. So it wouldn't have much of an effect on our transportation, and I don't think we would have much of an effect, except for the fact that it's, if you have to go to the doctor, or you have to go to urgent care, you need to go to the doctor that day, or we're filled up when you need to get that appointment, you would then have this option.
Okay, thank you. I have several seniors in my precinct that are concerned about Council on Aging and the number of trips they can get in a day and all that kind of thing.
We would still take seniors to the doctor.
This would be in addition to that.
Correct.
Which is good.
Ms. Beyer.
Kathy Beyer, Precinct 2, and I have a question for Mr. Sanchez. The groups of people who you are looking at being able to get a stipend so that they basically end up with a reduced rate, are those groups already set, or is that flexible, still open for debate? Because I'm thinking of some people you may have missed.
Well, we do not have a list. Can you hear me?
I can.
We do not have a list right now. We talked about doing those 3 criteria. Obviously, the Board of and this is part of a pilot program to actually work those details out, is to see if we're missing on maybe some population that we need to be integrated as part of the group. But as we go forward, the 3 criteria I mentioned are the ones that we're starting with. And like I said, again, if we need to relook, that's why we are asking for these funds, so we can do that while we're doing the pilot.
Okay.
Mr. Bushel, did you have a question back there?
Thank you very much, Ms. Moderator. Chair Pichelt, Precinct 4. I had essentially the same questions, like what are the criteria that are to be set forth? And I just want to make sure that if we're voting today on removing $50K from the Beeline, that I actually know what we're voting on. So it's like that we're not ending up coming up with like criteria that are not well defined, that may or may not meet our needs, and then potentially risking the Beeline not operating at the top of its performance. I just want to make sure that that's the case.
Ms. Phillips.
Cindy Phillips, Precinct 2.
I do have a couple of questions about who's going to be able to use the bus, of course. And one is, are the people who are already using it frequently guaranteed that they can continue to use it? And I'm concerned about the fact that the Beeline will allow anyone to use the bus, and now this project will have guidelines about who can use the bus. That's a little bit funky to me. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, and I guess the part that we may be missing out of this is that our ridership is going down dramatically. So if we had a very well-used Burlington transit system, we wouldn't be here today. If we were still giving 50,000 rides a year, we wouldn't be proposing any changes. We're averaging about 40 rides a day, 40 rides. That means it's a bus for 10 and a half hours going out town, giving probably 20 people, although you take it 2 or 3 times a day, so maybe less than 20, a ride to and back. So we're talking about very, very limited numbers. So this is why we're proposing this change. If we had a lot of ridership, I would love to have a lot of ridership, then we'll be running the bus and everybody will be happy and we'll still be subsidizing the bus as we do today. But our sense from town meeting over the last 10 years that I stood in front of you is that every year town meeting is saying we're spending a lot of money for buses that run around town empty. We agree, the buses are running around town empty. Most of the day, there's nobody in the bus. I ride the bus every now and then because I want to see who is riding the bus and how many people are riding. And sometimes it's just me riding the bus when I take the bus to see how many people are riding. So this is why we're proposing this solution to you. And again, we don't want to leave anybody out in the cold if we need to increase the criteria or secure the criteria to get more people to utilize this other service. That's that we're going to have the pilot program for.
Ms. Nash.
Mildred Nash, Precinct 3. I'm really glad to hear that there are other people besides me who are concerned about this. I am so concerned, in fact, that I called the town clerk and asked her if she would, through the accountant, give us information on the Beeline so that we would have something to compare with the what's quoted in here as a transportation subsidy. And there was a pass out on the table. I don't know if you got it, but if you did, I would like you to look at it because I think it's very revealing. I am not good at math, and so I have to tell you that page 2 is a little beyond my bailiwick, but if the town accountant is here, he could explain it if anybody would like it. I like to have things boiled down to what I can manage, and I think that's on the first page. I have to say, when I hear about a loyal ridership, I have to say maybe the problem is we don't have a loyal Beeline. Because as Mr. Sanchez said, we had 50,000 trips, a number of years ago, and we're down to 10,000. Well, it might have something to do with 3 buses being down to 1. When you have only 1 bus that goes, only the truly desperate can take it, and they pay more than I would pay to take the MBTA bus all the way to the airport. But that brings up something very interesting. I have been on the Beeline committee virtually since it started, and the last 3 years, if I have been invited or heard of more than I can think of, maybe 3 meetings max over the last 3 years. I don't know what that means, but last year when I heard there were troubles on the Beeline, I went to the DPW office, talked to Patty Robichaud and so forth, and nothing happened. But let's look at what I got from the information. If you have the first page of the pass out, I basically asked for all the information on page 2 to be put into some kind of way that we could calculate what the cost would be per household for the Beeline. All right, and it boils down that in 2015, which would be when we had possibly 3, but maybe only 2 buses, I'm not sure, the average cost per year to the household was $22.27 on their tax rate. On 2016, the same, a few pennies more. 2019, $14.56. The high tax bills in Burlington are not coming from the Beeline. Now, what I think is even more interesting is that there are 955 households in Burlington without vehicles, which was determined by the excise tax data. Now, when I asked for a request from the subsidy program about the system of administration, the type of ride vouchers, the additional funds from grants, and projected costs. And I always have to say, never forget that the grants are your tax dollar coming from some other pot of the government. But unfortunately, the response I got to that was, the specifics have not been set up yet. So we have a subsidy program that is being presented while at this Maytown meeting we were told that the Beeline is going to be gone at the end of this fiscal year. We have a subsidy program where they seem to be getting the $50,000 from the Beeline revolving account while still keeping the Beeline going. This seems like smoke and mirrors to me. Doesn't make much sense. When I called Lexpress and talked to the person there, it may be before grants were put on the table here, but they're kind of an iffy thing. It isn't clear if we have them or if we don't. But the Lexpress said they've had good times and they have had bad times. What really troubles me is that when we have Massachusetts with the worst traffic in the whole United States, virtual gridlock, which is not unusual in our town at more hours in the day than you care to think about, we're even thinking of getting rid of our public transportation system. At the Beeline meeting before we went to the Board of Selectmen, one of the interesting things was, as some of you have asked questions, how are we going to determine who gets to use this ride, which is only going to cost a little bit more? If I may digress, back years and years ago when there were 3 buses, we did a pilot program for 3 months when we didn't charge anything, and guess what? The ridership increased because those people who can afford to pay for the bus won't pay for it. But if you have a transportation system that is viable, which the Beeline Committee should be working on coming up with instead of doing nothing and letting this happen by default, maybe we could get something that would reduce the number of cars on the road. One of the statistics I was given is that Uber last year had 600,000 rides in Burlington. And Uber's how we're thinking of solving our transportation problem. But the other interesting thing was that somebody said, I know somebody who's old, because keep in mind, on the T, once you hit 65, you can go to the airport. Well, I think it just went up. It may be $1.10 now, but that's less than you're going to pay if you're trying to ride the Beeline around Burlington. But the whole point of this is we need to come up with a better solution. This isn't it. And I think what the town meeting needs to say to the Beeline Committee is, let's get going. Let's consult the business community. Let's get a system that helps everybody and that reduces the number of people who have to go in their own cars on the road, or for those people who would rather not have a car and be able to get around town on a viable public transportation system. Let's have a loyal Beeline. Thank you.
Mr. DiTucci.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. I do understand that the Beeline ridership has gone down. Now, through the moderator, Marge, how is the senior transportation? Is that gone up? Are we having a lot of seniors using that?
It ebbs and it flows, but right now it's about normal, about average. for trips.
So are we looking at, all in all, transportation within the town stabilizing and going down? Because I want to know if the senior ridership is up. Are people more independent, more mobile?
I think more people are using it for medical rides and less for other things. Our shopping trips are down. People are using Uber more for going shopping because you don't have to wait for half an hour for the bus to leave the store. But for medical, I'd say it's probably up.
Okay. I was thinking more in terms of you saying that we're getting more and more seniors using the bus and the possibility of having a second bus to fill in the void with not just medical treatments, but for shopping and things of that nature, as opposed to using an outside contractor. You know, this could be something, for instance, that we could look at and say, if it's done, just in consideration to look at, can we do this in-house? Can we run it out of the COA, even though it's not senior transportation? It's just transportation for general public. And, you know, we could employ people, of course, you know, these non-pension jobs, but we could employ people, seniors in the town, that need to make extra money, like $18 an hour. They live in the town, they know where the pickups are and stuff. But I'm just looking at more of doing it in town. There's always concerns about the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers, and I didn't want anybody to be in a situation. There'll always be those people that have money that no matter what, they'll use the Uber and they'll use the Lyft. But that's not going to be the audience that we're looking for. We're going to be looking for the audience like we had just mentioned a little while ago, people that just don't have the money to use Lyft or Uber. That's all.
Mr. Moderator?
Yeah.
So one of the huge limitations with using the COA vans for, and we have 2 vans going now, for using COA vans but for all of that kind of transportation, is our hours are only 9 to 3, and there's no real way to increase those hours. So where the Beeline is, what is it, what time does it, 7:30 to 6, and then, you know, Uber or Lyft or taxis are 24/7, we would just be 9 to 3. And to increase those hours would be much more difficult because then there's nobody in the office to, if there's a problem. So we run a bus on Saturdays, and that means I'm fielding all the calls on Saturdays if there's a problem. So, and if somebody, we had somebody call out sick, say they couldn't go to their shopping trip Saturday, and, she was all upset because the van driver called and said, well, don't you check your voicemail? Well, no, that's why they called before they picked them up. But that would be, if we increased our van hours, that would be morning and that would be every afternoon, that if there was a problem, there was no one in the office to field those phone calls.
Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Shari Ellis, Precinct 3. I wanted to make a statement that I think by transferring this money and starting a pilot program, as a community, it sounds like we are abandoning public transportation and the commitment to community and just forwarding on private transportation. And that's a statement that if we choose to do this, that's what we do. And I'm against that. I think as a community, we should be helping those of us around us who need the help. There's a lot of things in town that we pay for through our taxes, fire, ambulance, police, that we don't necessarily all use. And this could be one of them. We don't necessarily all use the public transportation, but for those who need it, I believe that we should provide that for them. I did have one question. Insurance-wise, how does that work with Ubers? Townwide insurance, you're subsidizing private transportation. How does that work, and how does it work? I don't use Uber, but how does it work with, people get rated and things like that? And how are all these things thought about? Has this been looked at all? Thank you.
Well, a couple of things, if I may, Mr. Moderator. And we've been working with Town Council on those details on how we're able to contract through Uber or Lyft for those services. We know that other communities are already doing it. They're already going through that process. Carlisle probably been the closest to us that is doing a similar system. They believe they're using Lyft. So we will work through our town council on all those details. And I do have to make a comment because I am a firm believer in public transportation, and I was telling Margie a story how no matter where I go, I use public transportation. So I'm a firm believer in using it. But I also believe in taking care of your money, of town meeting. And yeah, we provide a lot of services to police, fire, et cetera. But I'm sure that if we had a field that all of a sudden nobody used it anymore, I'm sure eventually we'll stop cutting the grass in that field and go and do something else with it. It's sort of like, at what point do we say, okay, maybe this is the time that we look for something that is more efficient, both to you as taxpayers and to the people using the service? Because one of the complaints that we get is how long they have to wait to get from one place to where they need to go right now. It's costing us a little bit over $14 a ride to get somebody from the town center to the mall. And I don't know how many of you have used Uber or Lyft, but it costs a little less than $14 to get you that distance. And that's sort of what we're trying to say, is like we can make it more effective, perhaps user-friendly to everybody, and the same costing you equal or maybe even less money.
Mr. Davison.
Doug Davison, Precinct 2. I'm on the subcommittee that heard this on Ways and Means. And so I just hit a couple of points. One, there is matching money. Is that true?
Originally, through a grant that we have applied for, there will be matching funds, yes.
Okay, so and that's federal. That's
But if I may, not for the pilot program now.
Okay, not for the pilot.
Not for the
okay. So, as John said, this is, right now we're spending $14 a ride to get people who need to get places on public transportation. To some degree to get them where they need to go, but we're not that effective at it. We've gone from 3 to 2 to 1 buses and routes, which we've heard. I don't think it's fair to assume that we dropped the buses because we were spending too much money and that way people couldn't ride it. We dropped the routes on the buses because ridership had fallen so much. That was the only way to continue to pay for a more limited service, but at least we could still offer a service. We're down to one route, and so it may serve a group of people well who live on that route, but there are many people that live in this town who need the service as much as someone who lives on Birchcrest or anywhere that the route passes, and they don't have access to get to the bus. So unless we're talking about radically expanding a bus system, which I don't think that, no matter how generous you feel as a taxpayer, I don't think that that's what we're going to vote for. Some kind of on-demand service is our next best thing. I think the problem, which will be one of those good and bad problems that we may face, is if this is successful and we can iron it out, we may be saying, wow, this is costing us a lot of money because we're serving so many more people. So the chance that we're going to spend more money on this in the long run is real, but the number of people we're reaching for that more money is also going to be, I believe, impressive if we can come up with a system that works. This pilot program is just an opportunity to try for 6 months before the Beeline stops. At this point, the Beeline is going to stop on July 1st. And then we won't have a system, and if we haven't at least tried to put something in place, then we really will be leaving people out. So this is a commitment to continuing to try to help people get to where they need to go, to actually expand access to many more parts of town than one little circle, and to maybe get them there more effectively and efficiently than having an empty bus drive around town in a circle and occasionally pick somebody up. So we supported it 2-0 for those reasons.
Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Monty Pearson, Precinct 3. The question I have is that you're going to be providing service for the elderly and disabled, and I understand that, but you also say households with income-eligible residents. So which residents of Burlington are deserving of bus service and which residents are not?
So again, in the first round of this plan, we're looking at 3 times the poverty line. So anybody, 300%, yeah, which is 3 times. So anybody who falls below that, 300% the poverty line.
Okay, and so do people have to submit an application?
Which is about $63,000 a year.
Okay, and do people have to submit an application for that?
Correct.
And so people who have more income than that can't ride bus or aren't provided with any bus service in Burlington then?
Well, we wouldn't have a bus, so they wouldn't get a subsidy to ride Uber.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. I guess that the issue is that I had always thought that the bus service was meant to help seniors, but also that it was meant to have some way of the town addressing some of the traffic issues in town and things like that. And when you were looking at those other alternatives earlier in your plan, did you look at a bus plan that said, we're going to have a bus service that attempts to reduce the amount of traffic in town by serving the businesses and restaurants a good deal? Or was it, I mean, the thing about the B-line is always that it's focused on whether people go in or out of the Council of Aging, and so that leaves the rest of us out. So I'm just wondering if you looked at a real bus service for everybody.
Yeah, actually, as part of the study that we did for the 3 communities, they did all kinds of analysis, density analysis of population, density of businesses, density of places where people want to go. And they actually recommended that we reduce the amount of area that we service in Burlington to actually limit it, and I can show you a plan that I have here, limit it to a service starting pretty much at the Human Services Building, running to Crossroads, back to the mall, going to Market Basket and Turnpike, and back to the center of town, which is a lot less than what service is right now, in a way to connect with the other 2 towns, because those seems to be the areas where we have the most places where people want to go, including businesses, the more jobs, and also some of the population densities that we can hit. That system alone was going to cost us a little more than what it's costing us right now, because part of the plan was to increase frequency of the system that we have. And they said, and then we'll have to do something else to bring the people from all the other areas of town to a place where they can catch the bus. So the answer is yes, we looked at it, but it was a combination of this plus some kind of a microtransit or Uber-like system.
So we could have had both. We could have had a system of buses in heavily used, populated areas and this microsystem also?
Correct. It depends on how much money you want to spend. One of the solutions we looked at was about $1 million. Another one was about $850,000.
And was there any analysis of what kind of impact on traffic it would have?
No, none of this traffic analysis, no, because I mean, this is all like assumes that people are going to ride it. And again, based on our numbers, I think that the biggest problem we have is actually our own bus going around town. We know passengers. So
right, I understand that problem. Yeah. It's just that it's like Ms. Ellis said, is that if we're concerned about traffic in town, and if we're concerned about beginning to alleviate some of that and coming up with ideas with that there seems to be something that was left out. And the value of that seems to only have been evaluated in terms of specifically a cash outlay and whether or not the town has any other benefits it was going to get from that. So I'm just uncomfortable with the idea that we're going to abandon having a bus in an urban area that has 100,000 people in it every day.
Mr. Sachs.
It's one of these, John Sachs, Precinct 7. It's one of these problems that it's obviously not a simple thing. I mean, look at all the discussion over this. I wanted to ask a couple clarifying questions. Number one, it seems obvious that the number of people who don't have a car who need rides has not gone down, but the ridership has gone down drastically. And I'm assuming, or can we assume that that is because those people who aren't taking the Beeline but need to get places are taking Uber and Lyft? Do we know this?
We can't really make that assumption. We think that some of our riders have really, I'm going to call it aged out of the system. You know, they're probably no longer able to go by themselves on a bus. The people that we tend to see, at least when I ride, are mostly people who can't get a driver's license for one reason or the other.
All right. Because if we knew that the ridership was going down I mean, I drove for Lyft for a little while, so I know like this much about it. I know that there are group rides and there are single rides, but you don't, a lot of people go for the single rides. Because when you do a group ride, you don't know exactly where you're going to end up. The good thing about the Uber and Lyft for the passenger is it picks you up at your door if it's cold, which it does get, or hot, which it does get, or rainy. And it seems to me that it's obvious that part of the traffic problem in greater Boston is Uber and Lyft. I mean, you just see them on the road. I think it's pretty obvious that that's part of the problem. Instead of taking the bus to the airport, people take an Uber and Lyft because it picks you up at your door. And if it's 12 degrees or 110, that's really nice. And it's, like a friend of mine said, it's a really good, Uber and Lyft are really good for the driver, makes a living, although I can tell you it's not much. And it's great for the passenger, but it's not good for society because it just adds more cars to the road. And from that point of view, I don't like it. But I do like the idea of a senior citizen, if we can solve this woman's problem. She said, I don't have a smartphone, so I can't call Uber and Lyft. Even if you guys subsidize me, she can't deal with it. That needs to be solved. But I do like the idea of a person who is disabled or has no license for whatever other reason, or they're just too old, to be able to pick up at their door and brought to where they want to go. And Miller, I'd love to hear your point of view on that, because it strikes me that like that's really the bottom line is those services, for better or for worse, they pick you up at your door regardless of the weather and they bring you where you need to go. And I think in the end, that's going to win out. I think it's just going to win out over a route that just goes around town. So it strikes me as if we could think of a system where there is a system where we have a couple of vans in town and they're run like Uber or Lyft, that people just call a number, it shows up at their door, and it takes them where they want to go. Instead of just running a van in circles where nobody lives. In the end, we know that's not going to win. It's not going to win. People are going to say, no, it's 5 degrees, I'm not standing outside. So that's my feeling. I think if we could figure out a way to pick people up at their house, take them where they want to go, solve her problem, she didn't have a smartphone. I think in the end that's what we're going to have to do, because I think it's the only real solution.
Now, we seem to be talking all around this. Can we focus on whether you wish to do the pilot program or not? Let's not get distracted by other things for the Beeline. Do we want to run the pilot program or not? Ms. Nash.
Thank you, Mildred Nash. In response to your question, I think that one thing that came up, which I got distracted.
Excuse me, Mrs. Nash.
Right.
I just asked for people to say whether they wish to vote, support, or not support.
But I'm answering his question.
Well, that's not what I'm asking people to do.
The question was that they said, what about the elderly? Oh, well, if they have money, they can't ride it. What if we had the 50,000 rides that we had a few years ago when we had more buses and they were all taking this Uber system? I don't think this is thought out. I really think what town meeting needs to do is vote this down and say, Beeline, get on the bus and make it work. Get in the people who could help from the balls, from the business community, the people here who could make it work, and come back to town meeting with a program that works. Thank you.
Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Move the question.
Again, that motion cannot be debated. All those in favor of moving the question? All those opposed? Question has been moved. Now we'll vote on the article. All those in favor? All those opposed? Let's try this one more time. All those in favor? All those opposed? There's a clear majority in favor of the article. The article passes. Brings us to Article 8. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee for the article that is as printed in the warrant to see if the town will vote to reduce the school education budget by the change in the amount of money for the change in the bus contract. Ways and Means, Mr. Riggs.
Ways and Means voted 9-0-0 in favor of making this adjustment.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. School Committee, do we have a vote on this?
School committee was unanimous in their support of this
Thank you.
reduction.
Is there a presentation on this article?
No, sir.
Questions from the body? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Article 9. It's been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and the article is as printed in the warrant. This is to see if we'll accept money from the will of Marshall Simons. Ways and Means.
It's always a pleasure for Ways and Means to consider this item. Ways and Means voted 9-0-0 in favor. There was a handout in the back that will give an overview of how the money would be used to improve Simons Park. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
Kevin Sullivan, Chairman of the Rec Commission, and it was a unanimous vote. And you voted on this once already. It takes 2 readings, so this is the second vote.
Questions on this article? Yes, Ms. Damiani.
Lucy Damiani, Precinct 3. I'd like to ask, do you have any idea what the funds might be used for in the near term?
Through the moderator.
Mr. Sullivan.
So yes, a few of the things that are going to be done is a retaining wall at Simons Park, a modular space for therapeutic recreation during the summer season, special event programs held at the park, replace some fencing, and improve some of the turf conditions at the park as well.
Further questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? A unanimous vote out of this body. I'm impressed. Okay, Article 10. Again, it has been moved and seconded and is as printed in the warrant. Let me tell you how we're going to deal with this article. There is going to be an amendment made to it by the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. I've asked the proponent to make their presentation first so we all get on the same page with this article. At which point I will then ask the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee to make their amendment. We will discuss and vote on the amendment, and then move forward with discussion and vote on the main motion. I can't even start it. Learn something new. I can't start this without a recommendation from the planning board. Not even start. So, planning board, please. Do we have a recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, we do. Good evening, everyone. The planning board voted in favor, 7-0, to recommend favorably on the petition to amend the Northwest Park Plan Development District zoning bylaw submitted by the Nordblom Company on May 16th, 2019, advertised for the planning board meeting of June 20th, 2019, and further amended and included in the print warrant as Article 10 for the September 23, 2019 town meeting. The planning board further recommends favorably on the amendment submitted by the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee that they voted on September 11th and submitted as an amended motion for the September 23rd town meeting. In addition to that, the planning board has the following additional recommendations for town meeting. 1, the Nordblom Company, in a letter dated September 16th, 2019, has agreed to include within the special permit issued by the planning board an offer to the town for the planning board to accept an amount up to $25,000 for the retention of necessary professionals and/or legal counsel to assist the town in connection with the preparation of the affordable housing agreement and the development of its applicable guidelines and eligibility criteria for implementation of local senior affordable units. 2, the Nordblom Company also has committed to include within the special permit issued by the planning board a commitment that the conditions of affordability and preference shall be part of an affordable housing restriction agreement, which will be executed by the applicant and the town prior to the issuance of the first building permit or any units authorized as a result of the zoning amendment. 3, the Nordblom Company has also committed to include within the special permit that the units will be placed in a walkable area in proximity to amenities within the Northwest Park. Now, we recognize that these items are not binding with the passage of the town meeting vote, but it is believed that these commitments are an important step in the right direction toward additional affordable housing units for seniors in Burlington. Lastly, number 4, the planning board recommends that the Board of Selectmen form a committee to include representatives of relevant town departments and boards, including, but not limited to, the Planning Department and Board, the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, Housing Opportunities Partnership, Council on Aging, Land Use Committee, and Veterans to assist in the creation and implementation of the Affordable Housing Restriction Agreement, applicable guidelines, and eligibility criteria for implementation of the local senior affordable units. In brief.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, town officials, Robert Buckley, Raymond Bronstein. For those of you who were members of town meeting in 2007, when Northwest Park was adopted, you probably remember that one of the key components of the proposal was housing. And at the time, the request, there was a committee, I know some of the town meeting members sitting here were part of that committee, where we met all summer to try to develop a program for the park. And the initial conception of what the type of housing that was going to go in there was quite extensive. And the town meeting sentiment was, do 300 units, see how it goes, and come back and ask us for more if you need more. So last year, probably about the first of the year, we started getting a lot of pushback from some of the corporate tenants that were looking at the park to grow and expand and attracting tenants saying we need housing for our employees, which is their major resource. At the same time, Burlington has been one of the more proactive communities in providing affordable housing. I think it's been in the forefront for probably a number of decades. Has been innovative and very proactive in providing the traditional affordable housing For those who know what traditional affordable housing is, it's governed by the state. It's the so-called 40B type housing. It's state mandated, state guidelines, state regulation. However, about 20 years ago, for those who remember, the town embarked on a very unique proposal that they did the three-way land swap and did Grandview Farm, which was a very unique program that said, you know, we've been so proactive, we don't need protection from 40B, we're well protected, we can do what we want, we don't have to worry about the state or a 40B proposal coming forward. We're gonna do something for the seniors, and the town was very successful in that product. And I think it's been a success. It was very creative, and the state actually recognized it, and I know the Board of Selectmen at the time and the town received some awards from the Mass Municipal Association, is that correct? For the innovation of that project, and I think it's been successful. So at about the time that we were talking about housing going forward, coming back to town meeting to do 300 units of additional housing, which by the PDD that was put in place in 2007 requires a 10% affordable under the traditional guidelines. I had the distinct pleasure, and it was a pleasure, I'm probably the only one that Chris and I can say this, that sat through as a representative of the business community, I think it was 52 meetings of the Master Plan Committee. It was quite informative to learn a lot about the community and a lot about the issues facing this community. And I sat next to, I'm not going to mention her, but I listened to her talk about what it is like to be a senior in this community, where you start thinking about being able to sell your house and stay in the community. I think it's actually a social issue where you can't sell your house and stay in the community where you've spent your adult life. And I would question anyone in this body, if you think you could sell your house and take the proceeds of that house and stay in this community, it's a challenge. And most people have to move a great distance away. So there is a need for senior housing. And it's not just traditional senior housing, it's various options. So I went to Todd and I said, you know, we have something here. At the same time, the planning board came forward with the initiative. 2020, next year, is a big year for affordable housing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts because they reset the numbers. They have the numbers that everyone works on that 10% is reset in 2020. And the town said, let's be proactive and protect ourselves going forward. And they did the Davis project, which is off of Corporate Drive behind Londana, and they did 270 units of traditional affordable housing. And because it's rental housing, you get to count all 270 units in your subsidized housing inventory, which means you'd have to essentially build approximately 3,000 units of housing before you'd be in trouble again. So you have a cushion. So we spent the last 9 months talking about what can we do working with the town to come up with another creative program. So back in May, we filed the warrant article. We spent the summer working with the various groups to try to come up with I always refer to as off-the-rails housing program for seniors, so that you can develop your own standards to provide affordable housing programs, criteria, where you don't have to worry about the state's criteria. You're always going to be subject to state and federal laws on terms of housing, and that's why we want to do it right. And we said, you know, we've got to provide the money to the town to hire the right, and I'm not, you may be the right person, Lisa. You have very good town council, but the right consultants to do a program that satisfies the test of Federal Housing Act and local regulations, but you can control your own destiny. You don't have to, you know, you could create your own asset test as you did at Grandview Farm. So if someone sells the house, the asset, the proceeds of that house and the imputed income on that house may not count against your ability to qualify for housing to stay in a unit that is within walking distance to a supermarket or is within walking distance to a restaurant, so it's right in the community. And if you haven't been over there, it's a vibrant, walkable area. It's near the hospital. It's vibrant. So we started out with 10%, and we were told that's not going to do it. and we're at 14%, so that's 42 units of affordable housing for seniors, targeted for seniors. Now the question is, what's the criteria? And that's a tough question. So we said, you know what? We're not going to set your criteria. The town has to set your criteria, as you did on Grandview Farm. So we said, why doesn't the town form a committee through the selectmen? The town is managed by the selectmen and through the town meeting. Why don't we put together a committee and get the feedback and draft an agreement that will satisfy the regulatory tests that we have to satisfy, but also reflects the desires of the community to hopefully provide seniors with an option in town. And we said there has to be teeth to it. So we said, we don't get a building permit. We don't do anything unless and until we have that agreement in place. So you could approve this tonight, and we can't negotiate that agreement for whatever reason that we can't establish a criteria that everyone agrees on, and we're not going to build it. You know, we just are not going to build it because, first of all, we're not going to be able to finance it, but we're not going to be able to satisfy your desires. But we also said, okay, what happens in 5, 10, 15 years from now? There's not a need for senior affordable housing. Or you decide that you have other projects or other options. We provide an option that at any time the town can flip that housing to qualify the traditional housing and count it towards the subsidized housing inventory. So you have the option to go back and say, you know what, we don't need senior housing. I'm not making that call, but we provide you with an out to say, not us, you, that you can provide, you know, we want more subsidized housing, traditional subsidized housing. That's your call. And then there's a procedure, the planning board can qualify those units for traditional housing, but that's your call. So it's flexible, it's targeted, and it's unique. So I've talked enough. I wanted to set the stage, why we're here, what we want to accomplish. It's your call to vote it up or down. I'm going to have Todd walk through the proposal. It's exciting. I think that when the day is done, everyone will hopefully feel the way they did about Grandview and how we accomplished something positive there. But I told you not to talk too much, Todd, so I'm going to shut up.
Always good advice, Mr. Moderator, if I may. Hi, I'm Todd Fremont Smith. I'm with Nordblom Company. In 2006, I slipped in the shower and hit my head and had a vision of an industrial park that evolved into something better. We came to town meeting, asked for your tacit encouragement. In 2007, we came back with our zoning proposal, and I see some familiar faces, many familiar faces out here. So we did begin the reconstruction of Northwest Park. And I'm going to go back through, if I can figure out how to work this, history a little bit, just to tell you where we were. So Northwest Park is about 135 acres, which runs between Middlesex Turnpike and Route 3. And don't be alarmed by this history. I talk fast. I'll be done quickly, I promise. So it's a large parcel. It's a former industrial park. It was developed in the 1950s and 60s, and there was quite a bit of industry there. As we moved into the 70s and 80s, we did a fair job of trying to renovate some of these single-story flex buildings into office, interesting companies like medical device companies, that kind of thing. But it still lacked, it was still, as I said at the time, a soul-sucking place to work. And we wanted to create something better. You know, we wanted to create something with more of an urban vibe, something that the business park could flourish around, but also a place for the community. So we came in 2007 and we said, please let us rezone our park for mixed use. Mixed use in those days was a really new thing, was really exciting. All the kids were doing it. And we said, why would you do this? Well, for one reason, you're going to grow your tax base. We're going to do infrastructure improvements because the project is large enough to do infrastructure improvements in and around the park. We told you it was a chance to work on a long-term project with a family that's owned the site under common ownership for 50 years, 60 years. And we told you we were going to create something that was not just for the businesses there, but also for the Burlington residents. So we went through a whole process, meeting with after you rezoned it, in 2007, we had to go through the whole state process in 2008. We focused during the recession, which we did have a recession. People kept asking me, when are you going to start building Northwest Park? We had a pretty big dip there for a while, but we took that time to focus on getting MassWorks grants, and we took $1 million of Nordblom money and matched it up with $2 million of state money. On 3rd Ave, we did the same thing again, $2 million match on 4th Avenue. We repaved Middlesex Turnpike all the way from 2nd Avenue out to Route 62, replacing all the signals out there, the traffic signals. So we were pre-investing in what we believed would come, and for a while that was pretty nerve-wracking because it wasn't coming, but it eventually did come. Other people, just to be fair, Gutierrez did the same thing at 2nd Avenue, and Calvo, the Calvo site, which is Middlesex Crossing, made an investment up there as well. So the whole Middlesex Turnpike corridor was rebuilt. And ultimately, as the market returned, we were very careful to curate the tenants that we did allow to come into the park. At one point, I was talking to this body about an anchor. It was a sort of a store that begins with a big T, and we focused instead on Wegmans. We went out and found them, brought them in. I remember the initial meeting, they didn't know where they were. They said, what's Burlington? We had to tell them that Burlington was the capital city of Route 128. This is where they should be. And because we had Wegmans, we got the Bancroft, and we got Tony C's and King's. We told you that, and this food anchor, by the way, is not just an anchor for the community. It's an incredible anchor for the business park. Every single day, hundreds of people walk up here every day and get lunch, as you've probably seen. We told you we would get a boutique hotel, and at the time I didn't really know what a boutique hotel was. But we told you we'd find one, we did. So we didn't do a normal, boring suburban hotel flag. We did Archer, which is out of New York City. They built Burlington. They're doing Napa Valley, Austin, Texas. So it's a very sort of unique, independent flag. We found Lifetime Fitness, or they found us, or it took us about 5 years to make this deal. So again, we wanted to bring fitness to the park, but again, everything is best in class. Over the top in many ways. But again, what we're most proud of, what I'm most proud of is that we've created a place that people actually want to go, that it's a real place, that it's more than just a collection of shops. In fact, the shops are more food-centric and home-centric. That's really, when you live across the street from the Burlington Mall, you have to have a strategy. That was our strategy. And we also think that people, office workers, we're trying to do whatever we think the office workers really want to bring businesses into Burlington, grow the tax base, and they don't really want to go shopping all the time, but they will go out to restaurants, they'll go out to lunch, they'll go out for drinks. And then, of course, the community. We're always programming Easter egg hunts and Halloween parades and really trying to bring people into 3rd Ave and make 3rd Ave part of the community. And I think it's working. But as I said earlier, it's still a business park. So you have 135 acres, about 45 buildings, and even if you approve our request tonight to do 2 more buildings, we have 2 residential buildings on site now, 100% leased. We're asking for 2 more, but the balance of that site is still commercial. It's office, it's retail, hotel, fitness, and we have really exciting clusters now emerging at Northwest Park, and I'll just speak to the park because that's what I know, but we have a big 3D printing cluster emerging, 4 companies doing that there, which is a huge growth industry. Some of these tenants, like Desktop Metal, have gone from 6,000 square feet to 60,000 square feet in the past 24 months. Really rapid growth. We have a cluster of medical device companies and companies in the medical space that are also growing very quickly and acquiring. They're being acquired or they're acquiring other people. But again, they love being in Burlington because it's easy access, all the amenities are there. And we have a cluster of high-tech companies, as we always have, software and homeland defense. Growing the tax base, I just pulled a few of these examples to show what the pre-development, because I said it would grow the tax base, and I wanted, before I stood here again, I wanted to make sure it did grow the tax base. It does. Wegmans, the buildings that used to comprise the Wegmans sites, for instance, used to be paying $225 in taxes, now they're paying $600. The site where Archer is located was paying $55,000. It's now paying 10 times that amount of money, $565. I won't go through all of these, but there is a huge bump as we do each incremental redevelopment. And this is an evolutionary process. We're doing site by site by site. The taxes accordingly triple. On average, 300% growth, and you see that in the bottom right corner. So it didn't line up. So that D should be on next to the E. What we promised you in 2007 was a walking street with trees and pedestrians. And what we gave you, I think, is a walking street with trees and pedestrians. What we promised you was a place where Burlington residents can go and enjoy, and I think we delivered on that promise in many ways at Third Ave. So that makes me very happy to be able to stand here and say that. So we're here tonight because when I first came to town meeting, I'm almost done, we did ask for 1,200 units of housing. The town meeting said, time out, how about 300 units? Come back if you need more. We do think the next step is to build 2 more buildings, one at a time. We're not going to build one giant building. We're going to build 2 buildings that are going to look like this newest building that we built called the Huntington, which is a building with parking under, a very sort of contemporary form, 50/50s, 1s and 2 bedrooms. Elevator building with parking under. We think that's important because we're proposing that the affordability component of this project be a private-public partnership with the town and the Nordblom family to produce up to 42 units of senior affordable housing. And we think that the building itself is very senior-friendly. And when I say senior, I'm talking almost empty nester. In talking to Marge, it's 60, 62 years old and up. But the parking is under, the buildings have elevators, and then the units are flat. So they're flats with elevator service. Currently at the park, about 43% of the people in these buildings work in the park or work right around the park, which is a very high number. We have a lot of people at Leahy is a piece of it. Empty nesters are a real piece of what we're seeing. And then just corporate relocations. Average age is about 43. So it's a mature audience. And these are people who are renters by choice. They could very likely buy a home if they wanted to, but for whatever reason they're renting. Maybe they took a job, they're coming out of the city, moving from somewhere else in the country. So this is why we're here. We're here for a simple text amendment to change the 300 units at Northwest Park to 600. And again, there are already 300 built, 287 built. We would commit to building no one building larger than 170 units. So very similar to what we've done out there. Not a giant mega building, but different smaller buildings to create a neighborhood. And by the way, we would do them one at a time. We're not going to rush out and build 2 at the same time. 14% affordable. Our base zoning was 10%. We proposed moving that to 13%. The planning board and others asked us to meet them in the middle and go to 14%. And that would yield 42 senior affordable units. I won't go through this whole thing, but we did start in May, and we've been to a lot of meetings. And those are all the meetings we went to. We've been through planning board, ZBRC, land use, and others. So what would happen if you were kind enough to approve this tonight? It would be probably 3 years before any new building would open because we have to go through the AG approval of anything here. We have to go through the planning board and CONCON process. We have to develop plans for this very complicated building, get a building permit, and then we have to build the buildings. And buildings like this take about 18 months just to construct. So it wouldn't be a rapid process, but this is the beginning, and we're hoping to start on this process. In about 3 years from now, you'd see additional units at Northwest Park. And just to toot our own horn, why do we think Northwest Park is a good place for housing? We have a grocer, on-site grocery store, which is huge. We have a real MBTA connection. We have a very large, impermeable site with lots of ins and outs. And what you're working with the Nordblom family is long-term intergenerational management. They're not going anywhere. It's a core asset. They're going to keep it forever. So, and then, of course, the tenants. We literally have corporate tenants asking us, can we get an apartment? And we have to tell them, no, we're sold out. We have no apartments. So just to give you some pictures to those points, we have, obviously Wegmans on site, actual MBTA bus service that runs through the park, which is a huge amenity, direct to Alewife in the morning and coming out. It's one of the first stops coming out. It's very walkable, and you see that, people walking and jogging at Northwest Park. Lots of ins and outs. You have 2nd, 3rd, 4th, North, lots of ways to get in and out and diffuse the traffic. And for those reasons, we think it's a good idea for Burlington. It just increases the housing stock. It's very age-appropriate housing in terms of flats with elevators, parking under. And we know it's good for the businesses because the businesses love, 43% of the people in the building are literally in the park. So the affordability component of these units would be done under a private partnership with the town, that we would have a long-term agreement with the town to provide up to 42 units and the town would manage the list of senior affordable candidates, and they'd send them over, and then we'd manage the building full-time. These buildings are fully staffed with on-site people full-time, and they all work for Nordblom. So we do see this as being a chance for Burlington to be a leader. I think this is a real social need that this model could be replicated elsewhere. I already went through this. Some people are asking what would the rents be. The average rents would be about 50% of market, so about $1,400 on average, which is quite affordable for a brand new building. There'd be a Burlington preference, and qualifications for that list of people would be developed locally, not at the state level. They'd be developed by you and we working together. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, two comments. One, I know it's come up, some people have asked me this about the commitment, the letter that we sent. Is it a binding contract? It's not a binding contract. It's a commitment letter that we put together that sets forth for the planning board what the applicant is willing to do. He's not going anywhere. Those are going to be conditions. But if the town would be more comfortable, we'll turn it into a memorandum of understanding subject to town council review. And I can't imagine standing before the planning board trying to get a permit, which we have to get before we can do anything, without fulfilling that. And I do want to reiterate, we cannot get a building permit without having that agreement in place. And that is going to be a long, arduous process, because there are many different issues we have to grapple with, to make sure it's done right. And that's what we want to do. We want to do it right so that it becomes, like Grandview, that Burlington maintains its leadership role. So with that, we'll be quiet. We'll turn it over to the moderator and the body, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ellis for the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. As the proponent said, we met many times, both with them, the planning board, and had many conversations. We submitted an amended motion, which we did send out to the town. If you don't have a copy, I believe there's some on the back table. I'm not going to go through the details of all of that amendment, because you all have a copy of that. But, to highlight the points that the proponent has also already highlighted, from the original warrant that is printed that you have, they have increased the senior affordable from up from 13% to 14%. The agreement becomes, the local senior housing preference becomes the default. That is what will be constructed as a by right thing if they go through the planning board process as they need to do. And they also stated, as a further protection, the building permit can't be issued without that housing agreement as part of that. And with all of those things that we developed and worked on, the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee voted 8-0-0 to approve the amended motion. And we also had a recommendation as well. And I'll put my glasses on so I can read that one. The ZBRC recommends that the Board of Selectmen form a committee to include members of relevant town departments, boards, and committees, including but not limited to the Council on Aging, Veterans, the Disabilities Access, the Housing Partnership, Planning Board, ZBRC, and town meeting members, to assist with the creation and implementation of the local senior preference affordable housing restriction agreement for the Northwest Park. Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a second for the amendment? Okay, let's see if we can take care of this amendment first. The amendment is basically clarification. Is that correct, Ms. Ellis? It doesn't change the guts of the excuse me, of the warrant article. So, is there any questions on the text changes for the amendment? Yes, sir, Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Eiler, Precinct 6. Thanks to all the committees and boards who spent a lot of time on this, I can tell. I had one question related to the presentation that goes to this amendment. One of my concerns was if we went with a senior affordable option because we're setting up different criteria, it would not fall under the 40B guidelines potentially if it was less strict, obviously. And one thing I heard in the presentation is that the town at its option at any time later on, if it decided it was falling too close to the 40B limit or for whatever reason, it could decide to change those senior affordable units to traditional 40B type units. Did I hear that correctly? Okay. But in reading through the entire PDD, both the original and the amendment, I didn't see where that was spelled out anywhere. Is that in some side agreement, or how is that accomplished?
If you,
Mr. Buckley?
Mr. Moderator, if you look at the amendment, the existing language in paragraph 3, which is in the existing PDD, references the Affordable Housing Restriction Agreement, which references the state guidelines, and the new paragraph that is added says that in paragraph Y, affordable housing units, which will be governed by the Affordable Housing Restriction Agreement, which dovetails back to that. So that's a defined term. That's a state-defined term.
But does it say in there that any time in the future we can flip it back?
Yes, it says that unless the town it says
as I read it, it was at the initial starting of the development that decision could be made, but I didn't see anywhere in there it said it could be changed later on.
Unless the town otherwise advises the developer, the aforementioned percentage of acquired units shall be developed by local senior preference units. So the town can advise.
But that's at the beginning of the development. That doesn't seem to relate to later on. Am I reading something wrong?
Well, I have to read it. Let's see. Okay. Go ahead.
Ms. Gassner?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So overall, the agreement formed hopefully with a group of a larger group of town officials. The town governs the whole time for these affordable housing units. So what if you read the very last line that was clarified in the red line to say that that these units, and I don't have it right in front of me, but these units must be offered at the 80% of the average median income of this area. So the only thing that means is that we need to make sure that they're no less, that with our public-private partnership, that there's no less than 80%, but that brings us to what an SHI unit would be. Whether or not the town decides, right now it's the default to try to create the senior affordable preference units up front. If at any point in time we decided those units should be eligible for the subsidized housing inventory, the rent caps are still there within the state guidelines, and we would just need to decide and form and have the units be those SHI units. So what they're saying is they can be either SHI or senior affordable. They default to senior affordable at the onset, but we can decide at any time to switch them over. And just as a point, we did do the analysis of where we were with percentages. Right now we're about a little over 13.3 for the affordable housing SHI inventory, which you need to be over 10%. We used real-time census, or not census, but our local census and unit data that we have, adding these units, forecasting out to 2020, and you'd have to add about a little over 2,000 units before we were even threatened by the 10%. So that was the cushion that was discussed in the presentation, and the exercise that the planning department went through to kind of ensure that we do have a lot of room to run, and we do have the option to come up with some of different types of options, like we did with Grandview, where when we did Grandview, we were at 12.2%. So just for reference point. Well, thank you.
Just to make sure I understand, so I think that means that we can accomplish getting it back to being 40B compatible by changing our criteria for what senior affordable housing is to match what 40B is, essentially, if we decide that was important.
The town controls the type of units.
So it doesn't require us to change to PDD at all at that point to do that. It would be under those guidelines that we're setting. Thank you.
Now, does anybody have any questions or comments simply on the changes in text, not on the what will be the final article, but just the changes in text that the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee has presented? If we get, because this is an amendment, we got to get the amendment taken care of, and then we can go back to the main motion. So any comments on the text changes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, the article has been amended. Now we will go on to discuss the merits of it. Mr. Pearson, does the land use have a recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Monty Pearson, Precinct 3, Chairperson of the Land Use Committee. The Land Use Committee voted 4-1 in favor of this, and we believe it is a unique opportunity for the town to meet a very specific demonstrated need. You'll keep in mind that during the master planning process, the issue of affordable housing in town, people being able to stay in town, was something that came up over and over again. And the developer has given us the opportunity to have 42 units that are going to be for people here in Burlington to be able to stay in town. They will not have to relinquish their assets that they gathered by selling their house. And the units are about half of the market rate, which means that you don't have to have a huge income in order to be able to live in them. And that makes a really big difference, because the people who have not been able to access affordable housing before from this town are in that situation because they are asset rich and income poor. We fit this deal, unlike any other kind of deal that we could have in the future, removes the asset limits that other affordable housing deals have, and has very affordable costs for people. And so we think it's a really unique opportunity. So our committee is very happy to endorse this. We also will have one person from our committee participate in the discussions about how the program is to be administered, and we are happy to volunteer that time to make this project work.
Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Roger Bell, Precinct 6. Just some clarification on the town side. You say we have the ability to change from senior housing to 40B if need be at any particular time. Who exactly has the authority to do that? Is it this body? Is it the selectmen's purview? How does that get determined?
Mr. Buckley.
Mr. Moderator, in my opinion, it would be the Board of Selectmen. But that would something we can address as we do the housing affordable restriction agreement. But the frank answer is the town is administered through the Board of Selectmen.
So I would hope that maybe we have a role to play in that, since we're discussing how that needs to be addressed. And I understand that doesn't need to be today, but I'm thinking that maybe we should have some representation that includes this body in terms of how we're going to address that, and if and when we need to.
We have a comment here on this from Town Council, please.
I would agree with Attorney Buckley that the document, the affordable housing restriction, would run through the process by which the town would revert back to the affordable housing restriction being not senior. And so if the Board of Selectmen create that with the committee that's been recommended, that document would very specifically have to say how that change would occur, because of course it would affect the units and the timing of the units and how they would be included on the SHI. So it would have to be very clearly laid out in that restriction document.
Thank you, then.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Buckley.
May I add to that? That's why we would like the input of as many parties as we can, so that we're on the same page.
Yes, and there was a recommendation by the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, and it has been handed to me as a resolution to, that we will do at the, after finishing the warrant articles that discusses the content and who should be on this committee that discusses and figures out what the criteria should be. Mr. Giannino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Gary Giannino, Precinct 1. I sat here in 2007, heard the presentation, and in that presentation and in the special conditions, it talks about we'll develop 300 permitted residential units, which will consist of studios, ones, twos, not, for purchase or rent. Now, when we talk about diversified housing and housing stock in Burlington, there was, and I believe Attorney Buckley brought up Grandview Farm, we had hit different criterias. We had the affordable housing for the apartments, and we also had some affordable housing for people who still wanted to remain in ownership. What's before us today strikes purchase price. There has never been construction of those 300 units to have any condominiums. It was all rental. I'm not sure how many Burlington residents from this town live in those apartments, but I do know there's part of the population in this community who would like to stay in the community that may, and in that, if I go back to the conditions, 10% of those purchase price was also going to have to be established by state statute for affordability. So this project has not done that. These additional units, in fact, strike any purchase price. So I'm not sure that if it is the panacea of taking care of everything in this community that has housing stock. There are people, empty nesters, in the community who may not meet income criteria. They want to stay in the town and stay somewhere vibrant versus being a townhouse or a condominium that's not in the middle of something vibrant as such. If you've done a great job with the project. There's a lot there, but they're just rental units. And the fact that you've lost the zest to put what you promised in 2007, some residential units, just disappoints me. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, if I may. Well, I don't want to disappoint you because I remember you being part of this process. I don't think we ever promised to build condominiums. We are, as a firm, generally averse to condominiums. They come with a very inefficient tax structure. They come with lawsuits from condominium associations. So I just digress a little bit to say that we don't normally do condominiums. I'm not against condominiums. This proposal is for rental housing. That's the way it's been conceived. But we can't solve every housing need in Burlington at Northwest Park. We're trying to do the best thing that we can with the project and do what we think is right. But there are other places that you can buy a condominium from developers that want to be condo developers, which we are not. So,
Mr. Giannino.
In your presentation, you spoke about condominiums. The special conditions talks about condominium. It may not have been a promise. You discussed it, you talked about the diversity. And quickly, and I know the market has changed. I'm in similar business. We don't develop, but the market has changed. When you made the presentation in 2007, you talked about certain things happening. This has not happened, and you're striking it from the conditions now. You strike anywhere it says
we're not trying to, it's not our intent to preclude forever.
You're striking the words. All you're leaving in there is rental.
For this proposal?
Mr. Buckley.
Carter, Gary, I don't think there was ever anything in there about, it was multifamily housing.
I'll read it again. Shall be designated as housing units for which the purchase price or rent is established in
Or
accordance.
rent. They could be for sale or rent.
In the presentation, it was discussed to have some, all I'm telling you, because I remember I was sitting down there with a selectman sit, and that was part of the presentation. I understand the market. If it's changed, you don't want to do it, you don't think it's feasibly profitable, I understand that. You're striking it, so there is no need. What I would suggest, if there is any agreement with this town, to put it in writing and have it set in stone so there is no interpretation down the road. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, if I may.
Mr. Buckley.
The intent was if you do affordable housing, you can do it either as for sale or rent. And what we were trying to do is say if you do it, there are different rules that apply for either or. So that's all we were trying to do.
Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to clarify something that's in the language of the amendment. So in the section Mr. Genin was talking about, section 3, the reason that the purchase price is being struck is because that section is the part that was built in 2015 and 16. So there's no chance for that to ever become a purchase because they are now affordable units as they were built. So that is the part of section 3 that has already done. You'll notice it says in there that it was part of the January 22nd, 2007 town meeting. So that paragraph is basically clarifying what has already been built. You can't do anything with what's already been built. So the next section, section 4, is what is to come. So I just wanted to clarify that, and hopefully that clarifies things.
Thank you. Mr. Rossi. Get a microphone up back, please.
Gene Rossi, Precinct 2. I was curious with all these units coming on. We haven't heard a water and sewer capacity report in quite some time. Are we going to be able to provide water and sewer services for these extra 300 units?
Is there anyone who can answer that question? Mr. Sanchez is not here.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Buckley.
In my discussions, I don't want to put any words in Mr. Sanchez's mouth since he's not here, but two things. If there is a capacity issue, we don't get a building permit, and that will certainly come up during the permitting process, that it will become an issue, but my understanding there is, but we'll soon find out. This just allows us to proceed with the discussions and the preparations of the agreements and the plans. If there is not enough capacity, then we are in a delicate situation. We wouldn't be able to go forward. So, but my understanding, there is capacity.
Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll admit I'm on the fence with this project. I do like the whole development area there. I think it is beautifully done. So I think from that point of view, you guys have done a good job. My concern is from a resource point of view also. We know that the town is undergoing a project to connect MWA right now. And until that's done, which will take quite a bit of time, there is definitely a capacity issue that Mr. Sanchez has described, where we basically can't afford for anything to go wrong, as we all know, as he gave in his presentation at previous town meetings. The other resource that I'm concerned about is the schools. If we look at this project just conservatively at 300 units, if we even assume 1.5 residents per unit, which I suspect is conservative, that would be 450 additional folks in town, which is 1.7%. If you add 1.7% to our schools, that actually ends up being about 5 students per grade, just for this development alone. And yes, I understand the 42 senior units, which are a small part of this, relatively speaking, will not have children probably. But let's just go with that rough average. And yes, there will be additional taxes coming in to help subsidize the additional resources required. But the schools are an interesting inflection point where if you listen to Dr. Conti, the elementary schools basically can't take any more students without increasing class sizes because there just aren't enough classrooms. So there's one of the things that will be coming before you eventually will be the need to build new schools, elementary in particular, and this type of thing will exacerbate that and move up the timeline. So just be aware that while there are certainly a very good story from the tax revenue point of view, there also is a fairly significant infrastructure improvement that needs to come along with this that needs to be considered. Thank you.
I don't see anyone from the school committee here, but Mr. Fremont Smith.
May I respond? Yeah.
Do you have comments on how many kids may be there currently?
Thank you for your kind words about Third Ave, and I want your vote. So what we're seeing out there is that these units are at the upper end of the market, and the people who are living in these units could easily buy a home if they wanted to. So we're seeing very few children that are moving into these units as a matter of choice. We have, if you watch in the morning, there is a school bus that goes to the Tremont and Huntington. 2 or 3 kids gets off. There really aren't a lot of kids. They might be children that are already in the Burlington school system, which are staying with a divorced parent. There are some kids who are living there. Their families are building a house in Lexington, and they go to Lexington schools. We have some kids there who are going to Austin Prep. We've done the actual numbers, and I don't have them here tonight, but there are very few children that are coming out of these buildings. Just anecdotally, I can tell you that. I know there were some other people who wanted to speak, so.
Yes, sir in the red shirt. That's a Mr. DiTucci, yes. DiTucci number 2.
DiTucci number 2. Dan DiTucci, Jr., Precinct 6. So I actually did speak with Dr. Conti specifically about the schools because that's what my wife was all over me about. She's cursing me on my phone as I speak. But what we found out was in the 300 existing units that are there at Northwest Park, there are only 12 students in the schools. In comparison to the other apartments in the town, I can just tell you it's significantly less. So it doesn't appear to be an impact on the schools at this point.
Further questions? Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. I was here in 2007 when we voted for this this development, and I've got to say that I'm just as uncomfortable today as I was 12 years ago. I've been very critical about the PDD process from way back when, so it's not an issue necessarily with Northwest, so please don't take this, in a more personal manner. I don't like the open-endedness of the PDD, the way that we're seeing this play out, and my concern is that we're going to see it another 6, 10, another 12 years possibly, with changes coming around the corner. We tightened up the process not too long ago because we were having issues with this, developers coming in, and we were laid out this beautiful plan, and for whatever reason people voted for it, and for whatever reason people voted against it. And typically what we were seeing is we saw these plans change by the time when it came to the fruition. Again, you may like the changes, you may not like them, but the process itself I've always had an issue with, and I don't like it. I don't like the way a lot of times it plays out. I'm also concerned, as previous speakers, there's a lot of detail that hasn't been spelled out right now, and it's always that devil in the details sort of an issue. Does town meeting have that authority? Are we actually going to relinquish that without the proper commitments that we will be able to make that change from the senior affordable to the regular 40B. To me, there's just always been too many questions, and then it's always going to be ironed out later. Don't worry about it, people. Just vote this in, and we'll iron it out later. And all your concerns are going to be taken care of, by the way, because that's what they'll tell you. It's all going to get taken care of. Why it's not taken care of now, I don't know. I don't like the fact that we, as was mentioned earlier in this meeting, why we relinquish our authority as a town meeting when there's too many unanswered questions that need to be verified, and they need to be ironed out, and they need to be in writing, so when we vote for this, again, like it or don't like it, but we're a governing authority. My concern is that we're relinquishing certain aspects of this project to boards, bodies, committees. And that's not the way this is supposed to be run. And I've heard from too many people over the years in town, and I'm born and raised here, and I hear it all the time from people in my immediate neighborhood, and it's like, why do they keep doing this? They're looking at us so we have that authority. And I'm just asking you to please not support this tonight. I'm not saying it's a bad plan. I'm not saying it's a bad project or otherwise. I'll leave that up to you individual, because that would open up a whole other can of worms with people tonight, and everyone's hoping to get out of here relatively quick. I'm just asking to please postpone this until some of these other areas get ironed out, because clearly I've heard a multitude of comments tonight, and we're not getting answers, folks. I want answers before I either support or I vote this down. And I ask you for tonight, whether it's postpone it or otherwise, but please don't sit there and advocate your authority to other boards and committees. It's a disgrace. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for your comments. I thank you for participating 12 years ago. I live in the future, right? I live in a world of zoning. If I don't have zoning, I can't even have a meeting in my office as to what to do next. So when I go and say to our guys in the office, let's do another apartment building because the tenants are asking for it. We can really build more of a neighborhood that the apartments help the restaurants, they help Wegmans, they help Tony C's. They tell me, you don't have any zoning for housing. So before I can do the engineering on the water supply or figure out what the traffic light timing needs to be, I need to have zoning. And this is the board, I believe, that gives out zoning, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to ask you to trust us. We're going to do 2 more buildings. You're not even going to notice them. I would challenge, has anyone even had an open house for the Huntington? About 15 of you came, thank you very much, but these are beautiful buildings. They're taxed at a very high rate. They're built on an existing street grid within an existing mixed-use PDD zoning that this board, this body approved. You guys know what we're doing up at Northwest Park. Nothing's going to change. We're there every day. We're going to run it the same way we've been running it. So I hear your comments about being concerned that something bad is going to happen, but something good could happen too, right? Northwest Park was 2007. That lit a fire on 128. You had a rezoning at 2nd Avenue that Keurig took. You had a rezoning that caused Millipore to come. You had a rezoning that reinvigorated New England Executive Park. And then up and down 128, projects like in Linfield and elsewhere were copying what we were doing, literally copying what we were doing. So I just see this as a door to the future. There are a million technical issues that we need to deal with. Frankly, you don't want to deal with them at the planning board, the Concom, engineering department, to get all those details worked out. The last time we did a building like this, I was doing sump pumps in people's homes to find capacity for sewer flow. And all those things, the town makes us do all those things. They make us do pre-traffic reports, post-traffic reports. Believe me, that's what we do for a living all day long. So all I'm asking for is the zoning window to do a little bit more housing at Northwest Park. And I think the senior component is really a great opportunity. Our most enthusiastic residents up at the Tremont and the Huntington are older people who appreciate being around younger people. They appreciate being in community, being able to walk out to a restaurant, walk to Wegmans. They're some of our best, most enthusiastic, sticky residents. And we're really excited, actually, about doing this senior project. But again, it's your vote. That's just my impassioned response.
Ms. Damiani.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Lucy Damiani, Precinct 3. With all due respect, before town meeting voted in 2007, David Tate and I and Frank Monaco and several other members from this body served with these gentlemen and the traffic engineer and the water person and other people as the preliminary committees appointed by the moderator at that time to work with you to look at the blank slate that you presented to us that eventually became the pictures that you presented in 2007. And it was a long, arduous process. It was very meaningful to me. I appreciated your candor at that time. I don't have any recollection of promises of condominiums. My recollection is that there would be housing. And I always assumed, perhaps incorrectly, relative to Mr. Janino's comment, that it would be housing according to what the market required at the time. On my desk in my office, I have a little picture that you handed each of us after the vote, and I've looked at it from time to time over the years. Like every day I go to my copy machine. And there were many years when I thought, when is this going to happen? And that was during the recession when you were doing the roads, which you said you would do. I think the family has been very diligent to do what they said they do. You've been good stewards of the property, and it's definitely different. It's difficult for people who don't appreciate how busy it is on that side of town. But from the standpoint of the tax base, the opportunities that are there for people who couldn't live in town before and still get to Boston or now work in that area, I think it's been a plus. And I think you should support this article. I have no doubt that they'll come through with what they say.
Ms. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sally Willard, Precinct 4. I do understand Mr. Cormier's comment that, you know, the PDD, we got whatever we got when we got it, but in 2012, town meeting approved a complete rewrite of Article 12, which deals with the PDD. And that set in place a series of processes for all future PDDs. The existing PDDs are zoning unto themselves. And I believe that the Nordblom Company has said, this is what we're going to do, as Mrs. Damiani said, this is what we're going to do, and they've done it. And they've been very responsible, and I fully support this. Thank you.
Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Cormier's comments that the PDD is exactly the zoning tool that is good for town meeting, because every change that they want to do, they need to come to town meeting. And they're asking for this. They came back X number of years later, and they're asking for more. And we have that decision to make. And as far as some of the details that aren't worked out, as far as this committee and the agreement, any town meeting member can go to the public hearing meetings at the Board of Selectmen and can volunteer to be on that committee. So if you're truly interested and want to take part in how that agreement is written, what the pools for the residents will be, you could ask to be a part of that committee through the Board of Selectmen. And if you don't want to be on the committee, you can go to the public meetings. They're on TV. You can watch them. And this is a very public process, and I think this is the way zoning should work through town meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Wells-Bean.
Andy Wells-Bean, Precinct 3.
I'm curious about the impact of this project on the broader town in two respects, so far as you can foresee them. One is on the broader carbon footprint of our town, and whether these buildings would be able to be built to a net zero standard as might be required by state zoning by that point. And then the second one is on transportation. You mentioned that 43% of folks work in town. If you have any insight into how many of the rest of the folks either take the T into Boston or Cambridge, or are seniors who are retired or work from home, and a little bit more about how it might impact the traffic situation.
Well, net zero is a pretty high standard. I know that we could commit to doing a LEED certification process on the building. I don't know if I can say net zero because that tends to come with no air conditioning, and I think, right? No? Okay. Well, we're certainly willing to build, and we do design to LEED silver, everything we do. As to traffic, I can tell you that you know, there are certain items at Northwest Park that drive traffic. Wegmans drives traffic. Although that traffic report came back about 50% of what we thought it was going to be, frankly. Lifetime Fitness has really activated 4th Avenue. If you go out to the Huntington in the middle of the day or in the morning, or the Tremont, very few cars are coming and going from those buildings. In fact, we did a comparison of a 200-unit building versus a 200,000-foot office building, and it generates about half the traffic of an office building. So if I were, if I had an office tenant that was building a big building, it would be twice as much traffic. So there is I think the housing tends to balance in a mixed use sense the traffic from all the office traffic that you have in town. It's kind of off cycle, and it's much less of a traffic generator. So there's not a real answer, a full answer, but that's what we observe. Thank you.
Ms. Kastner, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Just quickly from traffic perspective, you also have to remember when you passed this in 2007, you had a cap for development square footage. So it's not as if you're being asked right now, can we build 300 more housing units on top of everything else? We're discussing an exchange for situation. So if you were going to build office, just as mentioned, it would be twice as much as residential, and residential is opposite that of office. So, you know, Burlington and there's a lot of office traffic coming in, as demonstrated on the slide. Northwest Park is still an office park. So just, you know, like hotel and residential, it's the opposite flow of traffic. So it does help the traffic situation if they were going to build an office building in these locations. So just quickly, that it was something that came up during the planning board and was explained during that time.
Yeah, we're not seeking any increase in overall FAR in the zoning.
Mr. Tate.
Hi, David Tate, Precinct 5, and as Lucy said, I also sat on the Northwest Park Committee. I think this is a perfect example. Back in '07, we were looking at a project and wondering, this massive development, how is this going to come out? Is this all going to come together? This is exactly how I envisioned it when we were going through the approval process. So this isn't changing a lot to the PDD. Basically, cutting to the chase, it's just adding more residential units. So that's the question we've got to think about. Do you want more residential units over there? I think if you spent some time over there, I think this is an ideal place for it. The base that it would have is the tenant base that we're looking for, not with a lot of kids. They're going to tax the school system. So I am fully supportive of this project.
Thank you.
Mr. Kilday. And then Mr. DiTucci.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Excuse me. Tom Kelly, Precinct 6. Move the question, please.
The question has been moved. All those in favor of moving the question? All those opposed? That passes. On to the motion. This is a 2/3 and it's a zoning, so I'm going to need a count. I don't know, Mr. Priest, are you capable of counting? And Mr. Vespeo, do you think you can? Okay. So go halfway up, and one of you take the top half and one the bottom half of the town meeting. Mike, go all the way up beside Mr. Priest there. One of you work up and one of you work down. Make the dividing line. Okay, all those in favor? Oh, let's try this the easy way. All those opposed? All right, we have to have a count. All those in favor, please. Mike, you got a number?
34.
All those opposed? How many? 10. Good man. There being 81 in favor and 10 opposed, the motion passes.
Mr. Moderator, may I make a comment?
Please do.
On behalf of the development team, I'd like to thank the body for the consideration, and we look forward to working with you and making this a reality. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a resolution to take care of here. So let's, can we sit down and let's get this thing done quickly so then we can go home? If we don't get this adjourned, if we don't get this done, we have to come back on Wednesday. Okay. Resolution. Be it known that the Burlington Town Meeting members, following the passage of the Northwest Park PDD zoning amendment, are in agreement with the ZBRC and Planning Board recommendations that the Board of Selectmen form a committee to include members of relevant town departments, boards, and committees, including but not limited to Council on Aging, Veterans, Disabilities Access, Housing Partnership, Planning Board, ZBRC, and town meeting members to assist with creation and implementation of the local Senior Preference Affordable Housing Restriction Agreement for Northwest Park. Discussion on this. Oh, a second? Okay, do I need a second? All right, discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? The resolution passes unanimously. Why couldn't we do that for the zoning? Motion, do I hear a motion to adjourn? We're done.
Mr. Moderator.